Welcome back, everyone. We're here a little bit earlier in the week this time around. Thank you again to everyone who listened and gave us feedback. This week's Parsha is Parshat Yitro. This is really a Parsha that doesn't require much introduction, but we will set the context here. The Parsha begins with Yitro, which is, of course, Moshe's father-in-law, coming to visit, paying a family visit to Moshe and to the Jewish people. The Torah tells us that he was very inspired by what had happened to the Jewish people with the Kriyat Yamsuf and the war against Amalek. Yitro then, as he spends a little bit more time in the camp of the Bnei Israel, he proposes an entirely new judicial system to Moshe, which Moshe accepts. And of course, soon after, we have the seminal event of the Jewish people, which is the receiving of the Torah, and that's how our parasha concludes. So it's a well-known parsha. We read it during the Chag of Shavuot, contains the Ten Commandments. Today we will concentrate specifically on the proposal that Yitro had for Moshe and for the Jewish people. So in the 18th chapter, the 14th pasuk tells us, "Vayah choten Moshe et kol asher hu oseh la'am," and the father-in-law of Moshe, Yitro, saw everything that he was doing for the people. Vayomer, and he said to him, "Ma hadavar hazeh asher ata oseh la'am?" What is this that you're doing for the nation? Madua? How come? Ata yoshev levadecha, you're sitting alone. V'chol ha'am nitzav alecha min boker ad arev. How could this be that you're sitting here from morning until night? And we know that he wasn't doing this just to impress his father-in-law while he was visiting. And you're sitting here from morning until night, and everyone has to wait for you. This is a completely unsustainable system, and it needs to be reformed. And indeed, the following psukim tell us that he proposed a system where there would be minor disputes and judgments that would be settled by a lower court and a higher court if that wasn't resolved, and then a higher court after that. And eventually, if something wasn't resolved, then you would go all the way to the Supreme Court, which is, of course, Moshe. But not every small thing had to be arbitrated by Moshe. That's not a sustainable system, and that's what Yitro came to propose. Now, I intentionally use this concept of Supreme Court because we know that's how many systems work. The system in Israel, the system in America, of course, has different levels of courts, and you can go up the appeal system all the way to the Supreme Court. So the obvious question is, Moshe Rabbeinu, who was a very wise man, how come he never thought of this system, which we see all over the world today, that seems to be quite simple? Of course, you don't have to go to the top judge in the country for every small dispute. So what was this brilliant proposal, suggestion that Yitro had that Moshe couldn't have thought of himself?
I have no doubt that in the age of 80 something, Moshe had enough experience to know that the way he judged the people is not sustainable. I do believe, though, that Moshe knew another thing. In order to have a legal system, hierarchy, different courts in different places is essential. But what is much more essential is actually the authority of the law. And Moshe knew that if there will be no recognition and no appreciation to the authority of the law, you can have the best system in place, nothing is going to work. If people ignore the law, if people don't care about the law, if people don't understand where the law comes from, they will not respect it. And you can have as many courts and levels of courts that you want, it's not going to work. Moshe Rabbeinu took a nation of slaves. And you know what? Slaves between themselves have no law and no order. The only thing they know is that they have to work for their master. And he had to prepare them to be Am Hashem, not just a nation, but the nation of Hashem himself. So what will happen if Moshe will dilute, so to speak, the system, and many people are going to deal with the issues, the daily issues of people? Yes, maybe it will work better, but people will lose the understanding that the source of all these laws is Hashem himself. I can imagine that when people came to the tent of Moshe, they felt that the laws here are not just words and people who sat together to set up the laws, but it really comes from a higher place. It comes from Hashem himself. And I think that's what Moshe wanted. First of all, to establish the understanding of the people that their laws are very different from any other nation. They are laws that were received from Hashem. And for this, Moshe was the only one who capable to transmit this feeling and this understanding.
So you're almost saying that Moshe's judgment here of the Jewish people wasn't just a legal activity that he was doing, it was almost a medium which he was using to transmit the importance of Jewish law.
100%. And I will take just one example that you said before. Even according to the idea of Yitro, of Sarei Asarot, Sarei Meot, and so on, you get like a non-realistic number of judges per capita. You know, if you are going to check how many judges per capita you have in the States or here in Canada or in the modern world, you are going to get a number like 1 to 10,000, 1 to 15,000, something around this, I believe. In the desert, they had, according to the system that Yitro suggested, was 78,000 people for 600,000 males. Let's say, let's double it and add little children, something around 1% to 20 to 30 people. And you don't need that many people unless, and I think that even Yitro in his suggestion understood that the law in Am Yisrael is different than any other place. It represents something higher. And if you think about the need for Yirat Elokim, Yirei Elokim, judges who are going to be Yirei Elokim, they just simply have to know the law. I don't think that anyone looking for the Yirat Shamayim of judges anywhere, they just have to be expert in the law. It's nice if they are nice people, but no one will ask if they are Yirei Elokim or not. But Paro also understood that the law and the court and the judges of Am Yisrael represent something much bigger than just the letter of the law. They represent, in a way, Elokim. And therefore, only people who are Yirei Elokim are capable of bringing the Chukei Elokim into the Jewish people. But yet, the difference between Yitro and Moshe, I believe, was that Yitro saw the need for society to run well. Moshe saw the need of the Jewish people not as a society, but as Am Hashem. And therefore, he believed that the right system is, first of all, he himself represent where the law comes from. And then when Yitro came with this idea, Moshe understood that actually the judges can be people who represent Hashem in what they are doing. And he accepted the idea of Yitro. At least as, in his last speech on Sefer Devarim, he actually said that he made Sarei Asarot, Sarei Alafim, etc. So apparently he accepted the idea of Yitro, and he did not think, or he accepted the fact that it does not dilute the main message that the court is a place where God, so to speak, appeared to the people through the law.
We spoke in Parshat Shemot that the reason Moshe was the one who was the appropriate leader for the Jewish people was that he came as an outsider. He grew up in the palace of Paro, and therefore he was able to see that what's happening here is not the way that things should be. Whereas someone on the inside would not be able to see that. How much of Yitro's suggestion? How much did that come as an, so to speak, outsider who saw what Moshe was doing and said this is not a sustainable system, which someone like Moshe, who was entrenched in the system, was not able to see. Would you apply the same idea in this case?
Um, Yair, I don't know if you paid attention to the fact that Yitro actually did not care about the system itself. He did not care so much about like doing justice and to be nice to the people. Yitro came to visit Moshe because he was a family member. He was his father-in-law. And when he comes, he brings the children, he brings the wife of Moshe, and he presents himself as a family visit. And when he see what happened to Moshe, he start to be concerned about his son-in-law well-being. He understands that he will not be able to do it for a long time. But if you read the Torah on the Pshat level, he cared about Moshe. He saw that Moshe is going to collapse mentally and physically under the burden. So, insider or outsider, I don't think that this is the main point. I think that Yitro came as a family member. And he just cared about, as I say, the well-being of Moshe.
I do see a hint in the psukim that, for example, Yitro did understand the importance here. For example, when he makes his proposal of different levels of court, he tells Moshe, if you do this, and then he uses the word vetzivcha Elokim, meaning you have the approval of Hashem, ve'achol ta'amod, then you can go on with my proposal. So I do think that Yitro did see that there was a higher purpose here and not just logistically, you're not going to be able to see everyone and you're working way too hard and it's probably not good for my grandchildren and my daughter not to see their grandfather and husband respectively.
No, 100%. In order for Moshe to accept this idea, Yitro had to explain that he understands what is the need here, that he basically understands, but he would run the whole operation differently. But again, the motivation was, first of all, like to keep Moshe in good shape, so to speak.
The commentaries here have a very interesting machloket about what the timeline of Yitro's visit was. Chronologically, and we already discussed in previous weeks that the chronology is not obligatory in the Torah, meaning things can be out of order chronologically when it makes sense. Some say that it was indeed before the giving of the Torah, which appears later in our Parsha, and some say that it was later, after the giving of the Torah. Either way, we have to understand why the Torah would have put these parshas together. Why does this parsha, which seems to be a completely logistical chapter, why did the Torah see it as being important enough, especially if it's not when it actually happened? Why did the Torah see it as important enough to juxtapose immediately preceding the giving of the Torah?
Okay, I'm going back to the first answer here that we discussed. Receiving the Torah is something very, very unique that makes them Am Hashem, the nation of God. This is the purpose of Yetziat Mitzrayim. This is the purpose of receiving the Torah. This is the purpose of going to Eretz Israel, and they were on their way to Eretz Israel to establish a society that reflects the values of God to the entire world. And apparently, you cannot have a nation of Hashem if it's not based on the highest morals, values, which manifest themselves by the laws of the nation. So there is, I believe, an attachment to the idea of mishpat, of shoftim, and the idea of receiving the Torah in order to build a nation that when they are going to be in Eretz Israel, building Beit HaMikdash, are going to be a nation that represent Hashem. And interestingly enough, just to prove my point, we can see this idea that when the Jewish people arrived to Eretz Israel, they built the Mishkan, the temple. In the temple itself, there was a place for the sitting of the Sanhedrin. This is like the highest court of the Jewish people, and it could be elsewhere, in Yerushalayim, in Tel Aviv, in Yavne. But the halacha is that if you are not sitting in the temple, the Sanhedrin, this supreme court, so to speak, cannot function, cannot make certain decisions. And the reason is exactly that. The law of the Jewish people is not just a law to make sure that they behave nicely to each other or compensate for damages and so on. The law come to enable creating a society which is led by the values of Hashem. So the temple and the court, the highest, the Supreme Court, are going hand in hand. And indeed, as I said before, in Chutz La'aretz, there are no requirement as rigid as you have in Eretz Israel. Just for example, in Eretz Israel, you have to have in every city a court. In Chutz La'aretz, you just have to have in every region. You don't have in every city court. And I think the reason is that the Jewish people in Eretz Israel represent Hashem himself. Outside the land of Israel, they need to behave according to the values of Torah, obviously, but it's not as strict. And they are not the model that Hashem required the Jewish people to behave like in Eretz Israel.
I think it's a theme that we see across the Torah, that even what we call in secular law torts, or issues between damages between different people, for example, a lot of times we'll see the mixing of those kinds of laws with laws that are about the Beit HaMikdash and Dinei Kedusha, Dinei Tumah V'Tahara, impurity laws, and the laws of sacrifices, which most people intuitively think, oh, these are like the really important laws that bring you close to Hashem. And the torts is just a way to have a functioning society. And I think what you're saying is very true, that the message of this parsha, both of Yitro and what you're saying about the Supreme Court sitting in the Beit HaMikdash, is to show us that from the Torah's perspective, all the laws, whether they are necessary for a functioning society and ones that are easier for us to understand as being divine. In Judaism, they all are weaved together and comprise our entire legal system, whether in secular law we see them or not. They're all divinely inspired and all form the basis of Jewish law together.
If I can enter one comment, when I thought about the ideas of this parsha this morning, I thought also about the tefillah of Hashiva Shofteinu Kebarishona, which is talking about returning the law and the court to Am Yisrael. And usually you think, okay, we ask Hashem for good health, we ask Hashem for good year, for parnasa, we ask Hashem for geula, we ask Hashem for having good court system. But really, I think that Chachamim made it in the following way. You have good law system, you have great judges. They are going to take care over the wicked people. ולמלשינים אל תהי תקווה. They are going to develop a society of righteous people, על הצדיקים ועל החסידים. And this will enable the building of Yerushalayim, the returning of the king, bringing korbanot, retzeh. So you don't have here just a standalone request for having good judges. In order to get to retzeh, to the tefillah about the temple and about the korbanot, it starts with a nation. It starts with the people who are actually following the law of Torah. So I thought this morning that Ashivenu is actually Hakdama, its introduction to the pinnacle of Shmona Esrei, which is a retzeh, that one day we are going to be back in the temple. And again, the temple means not only korbanot, but also the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court that is settling all kinds of difficult issues. And it's part of a whole process of Geula and being Am Hashem.
Yes, and that takes us very nicely to next week, which is, of course, the Parsha of Mishpatim, where we learn about all the different halachot, oxen, and all kinds of different damages, guarding other people's objects, etc., which comes immediately after the giving of the Torah, which I think, again, is in line with the theme that we spoke about today, about how all the laws, whatever the judges were doing in the desert, whether it was prior or post Matan Torah, but immediately after giving the Torah and having this incredible event that formed us as a nation, immediately we go to the nitty-gritty of Parashat Mishpatim, of these basic laws, torts, etc., to show you that that was just as divine, and the commentaries all mention this aspect as well.
Beautiful idea. And after we are going to read, obviously, about building the Mishkan, which is very similar now to what I said before. We have Hashivenu and we have Retzeh in Beit HaMikdash. So it's actually one process that starts with the values represented by human being until you reach the highest point in the temple in Beit HaMikdash.
Pleasure discussing the Parsha with you as always, Abba. And I
Thank
look
you. It
forward
was
to seeing you next week. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you again to everyone who listened and watched and contacted us. And we're happy to be releasing this hopefully earlier and earlier every week. And Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you very much. By the way, last Shabbos, people in Shul came to me and told me that they really enjoyed our discussion. So please don't be shy. Tell us what you like, to suggest maybe some changes. We are very open to hear your comments.
Shabbat Shalom.
Da 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 da.